So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. My name is Chris, and that is Mike.
Hi, everyone.
And our co-host this week is Alex Bond-Burnett, founder of Ambition Impact.
I like Ambitious Impact. I might change it. Hi.
Yeah, and I'm tripping over your name. Thanks for the tip of going for Alex rather than Alexandra. And for some reason, I think of French when I say Bond-Burnett. Is it Bonbonette?
It should. So, it sounds like it should be, shouldn't it? Bond-Burnett. Yeah.
Bond-Burnett.
Maybe said with a French accent.
So, how's everybody's week been? Obviously, a busy week in the world of Chris Argent and Gen CFO. But Mike, come to you first.
Can I just do this in my normal accent, or do you want me to do it in
French?
No, I'll stick in my normal accent.
French or pumpkin is fine.
It's been a really good week, actually. So obviously, I was part of the Gen CFO Academy fun, running a couple of sessions and launching this podcast, which was great. I spent quite a lot of time recharging with some Xbox with my son this week because the weather's been awful. So it's been quite nice to sit down. And I suppose the really key work thing for me, as well as the Gen CFO Academy, is launching the data practices work I've been doing with the Open Data Institute, which got launched on Tuesday, to quite positive response. So I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, good week.
It sounds interesting. I never had you down as a gamer. I don't think we've ever spoken about this.
Well, kind of like, I suppose 20 years ago, maybe. Now I play like 2 games and that's it.
Wow, okay.
So I've got an Xbox to play 1 racing game and that's it. Because I don't have the time.
I think it's going to happen. My son's 10. Alex, you were saying your son's 6. I think at some point we're going to have to get involved. But how was your week?
Yeah. Pretty good. I've literally just come back from a speaking job. So it's nice to get out of the office. And my days can be really varied. I can either be traveling for like a week or 2, or then just be what I call grounded back in the office. This has been an office week, but ended the week on a half an outing.
And were you on a road show recently? Did I see that?
Yeah, I was on the ACCA roadshow, which was great fun. So I went to Bristol and I was a speaker there, and I did then a panel, and then they invited me out to to follow them to London. And I was the MC for the day at the Oxo Tower. So that was great fun.
No one wants to hear about what I've done this week because it's been all over social. But I was running Gen CFO Academy for our online community. It just blew up. It was fantastic. 3 days of content. And I think the biggest compliment I had was someone pinged me via the community personally and just sort of said, and I read this out, and I think I'm going to put it on the wall, but it was simply a learning and community building masterpiece exemplar. And I was just like, honestly, it's been such a 4 or 5 years in the making. And I feel like that felt like I'd arrived when I read that one, which was fantastic. And on personal side, Mike, I was in your neck of the woods recently. I went down to see my uncle down in Dorchester, who's a bit of an innovator himself, but more on the medical side. And he gave me a bit of a lecture about leadership, and actually reminded me that he went to uni with King Charles, which I completely forgot. I did know that when I was a kid because it was on the wall. But yeah,
I've got a quick question for you, Chris. So obviously the Academy's been this week, and it's been, you had 3 full-on days of stuff, and it was great. What did you do in the evenings to chill out, to kind of get yourself back for the next day? Because I always find those kind of days really exhausting. And I suppose, yeah, what did you do?
It's a great shout, actually. So we were all working. This is a peek under the bonnet. We're all celebratory, and publicly it was fantastic. And behind the scenes, it was fantastic as well. But we were doing, 12, 14-hour days, and then having to host and sort of be on it, and publicly be on it. And, Alex, I know that you present a lot as well. That sort of public face and private face, you have to sort of switch on and off. So unlike me, I was actually quiet at home. I basically just didn't do much. I was silent. Didn't really want to watch TV in the normal way. I think I took a quiet bath and tried to avoid bedtime. But yeah, it's a really good point, because you do have to recharge your batteries in between these these public moments. Alex, any tips for that? How do you go about it when you're on stage?
Well, I think it depends. What that's usually about is the whole extrovert introvert thing, which is where do you get your energy from, and the kind of, or ambivert, which is, I think I sit on a bit of both. So when I'm up there, I feel like really energized and like I'm in my element, but then afterwards, yeah, I'm with you. I kind of like a quiet train ride, or at least going back to my hotel room and just having some quiet time to down tools, as it were, and just zone out a bit. And weirdly, the pandemic really impacted me in that way. So it was like massive. I'd be out all the time, loving it, going up on stage, presenting, doing a lot of that. I do a lot of, I'm a trainer, obviously I do coaching and training. So I do a lot of facilitation work as well, which is very much like you're performing anyway. And that would energize me. And of course I was kind of locked away in this room with my laptop. And although you're talking to people, I found that then when we got back out there, I think it was like the first Accountex that came back on after the pandemic, I was exhausted, absolutely drained. I actually booked in my day, like I'd done my talks, and then of course you got the parties afterwards. But I actually went back to my hotel room and had a little nap. had a light, or I say a nap. I lay there and just stared at the ceiling, I think, for a bit to get the energy recharge, get the energy to go back out again, and then go again the next day. And so I think the only thing to say is really listen to where your energy is, and if you're someone that does need to recharge, make sure you're actually booking that in so you can show up again and not drain yourself out.
Power nap, disco nap, whatever you want to call it. It seems it certainly works. So just moving on to what's going on in the world this week. Hopefully you can hear this, but this kind of summed it up for me.
AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI is AI, 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 AI. It uses AI to bring AI, 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 AI.
Got the message? Yeah.
Was it about AI?
AI.
It was. That was the week, right? Because it was publicly. It was all about AI. The academy was all about sort of GenAI and technology, but I think that sort of summed it up this week. It seemed like the whole world was talking about generative AI and the impact on people, and how we need to kind of, lean into this change. It's sort of a human change as much as a technology change. And we had the fantastic Nina Schick, who did a keynote on GENai as part of what we were doing this week. And she kind of explained this in sort of global terms. She's actually got a background working in sort of geopolitics. And she was saying that this is a bit of a watershed moment, really, because she was seeing it through the eyes of population and government and planning, and just sort of saying that this is the shift that people have been waiting for in terms of GenAI, in terms of AI. And then we had a guy from the director of AI from IBM talking about what's kind of happening under the bonnet, and there's a sort of an economy and a land grab for this technology as well, was sort of how important it is. And it feels a little bit like, social media happening all over again. People are trying to get ahead of this technology and control it and make their millions. Mike, you've been part of the ODI conference. What was that like?
Well, so the ODI conference was very much about AI and the intersection between AI and data, as you can imagine. The interesting reflection that I heard from somebody at that conference was, you obviously had the AI summit the week before in Bletchley Park, where Rishi was interviewing Elon Musk, and there were other good things going on as well as that. But nobody apparently in that conference was talking about the data that underpins the generative AI and where the information's coming and how the messages come through. So one of the things that was really strong in the ODI conference was about without data, there is no AI. You have to have the data to train the AI. And actually, to have good AI and trustworthy AI, you have to have good data and trustworthy data. And that was a really strong message that came out from that conference for me. And I think it's just really interesting how we've almost gone to that black box model of AI now. It's almost like it's there, it just works. And actually, we're not really looking at its impact and what it does and how it makes us think.
Alex, what's your take on this? You know, it's very much part of the accounting and finance debate at the moment. If you were on a roadshow with a bunch of accountants, is this being talked about much?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's still, as with anything, and especially when we're talking about data and how clean your data is and everything like that, it always relies on humans to do it. So a lot of the conversation is always about, well, you know, it's a bit like the whole thing about how good your bookkeeping and in terms of your reporting and your forecasting. AI and generative AI is only trained on us. So it's going to have human flaws. And I think that is what the conversation is are we prepared for the, I suppose that it's actually a compliance question in a sense, as if we're using generative AI, who is going to check it and who is going to look at it and be creative with it, and what input is going into it and who is influencing that input. It's
a great point, actually. I think a lot of people are sort of assuming that whatever is coming out of a Gen AI prompt tool, whatever it is, it's fact. And people take it as fact, and then they run with it, and then actually they need to remember, actually maybe I should validate this a little bit or fact check this, you know, and what about the data underneath? And, you know, we've talked about this in the past, Mike, you know, performance of algorithms vary, so it's not like it's always right. It's always wrong, but how wrong is it? I love it. And I think there's a lot of philosophical debate around this at the moment, right? It's not just let's use the technology and on we go. We've even had the tech leaders. You talk about Rishi and Elon Musk. You know, we've had people calling out, "Oh, can we have a 6-month delay on Gen AI because we're not entirely sure where it's going?"
The genie's not going back in the bottle, though, right? It's out there and it's happening. I think in what you were just saying there, I think that again links back to the conversation I've been having on the data practices work I've been doing and thinking about that side of it, is that transparency and trustworthiness bit. Is how do you demonstrate if you're creating an AI model or an algorithm that actually the way that you're doing it is in a trustworthy way. And one of the ways of doing that is being transparent about how your algorithm works and where the data is coming from. We talked, Chris, a few months ago now when we were doing one of our mastermind sessions around the story a few years ago, so way before Gen AI was a mainstream thing, about the insurance company whose models that they were using to price insurance. If all other things were equal apart from the ethnicity of the person's name, you got different results around pricing. And that's how easy it is for bias to creep into a computer program algorithm system. Alex, I can see you. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, sorry, jumping in. I was just saying that's why it's really important, I think, for leaders to really work on their elements of self-awareness, because bias will be creeping into practice and process. And unless you are actively putting a process in to really check in with your human bias, and I'd like to approach that and say some people really clam up when you say unconscious bias, and it's like, oh my God, but we all have bias. That's how brains work. That's our own internal algorithm, is that we've learned something in the past, or we've inherited something, a belief or a fear or anything like that. We lean towards certainty and safety, and therefore that's our go-to with our brain functions. And unless you actually challenge, well, actually, do I know that to be true? Then it's like, well, it's like going somewhere. If you're going to, I don't know, the hospital or the shopping mall or something like that, and you go, well, the best route is this way, because you've always done it that way, then you won't ever go, well, actually, that's what my dad used to do, or that's what the person before me used to do. Maybe can I just check that? Maybe I should just check that a new route hasn't opened up, or somewhere didn't open up another lane, or there's a faster or better way of doing that. And that will translate. I mean, regardless of AI, that always translates into processes and to ethics and to all sorts of areas of how we develop businesses. So I think it's now more than ever, we're kind of in this wild west, which is why you're having the meetings up in Bletchley Park, because there is no rule. There's no rule to say to guard anything, and we don't know what to do, which is why I think it was Italy and various countries started banning ChatGPT, because they're like, whoa, we don't know what this can do. But they're acting out of fear. We're acting out of, I think, excitement and trying to get ahead of the curve.
And there's I think we need to accept that the governance is always going to follow the change a little bit on this. It's moving so fast. And I think there's, I love the opportunity, I'm excited by the opportunity, and knowledge is power, I think, in this place of innovation, because, the closer you get to these things, like I was saying about the director of AI was talking about LLMs and the sort of the language models behind GenAI. And, it was mind blowing, but when you boil it down, it's sort of statistics which you can get your head around, and there's a human role in translation of this stuff, as we said, about checking and validating all the rest of it. And there's, as you just said there, Alex, it's like there are assumptions that are being made by AI that we need to check, whether it's a route to the shop or whether it's the kind of connections that it makes, bigger buildings have bigger fires, so we need to build small buildings because then they will only have small fires. These sorts of correlation and causation sort of things. It's already, but the closer we get to it, right, Mike? The more we understand it, the more we're aware of it, the more comfortable with it, right?
I think so. I mean, as you were talking there, something that went through my head is that this is not the first time that humans have come across a technological step change, right? The one that went through my head is that when the cars were first invented and started going on the road, there were no speed limits. They didn't say which side of the road you drove on, such like. And it was only when accidents started to happen that those things started to get put in place.
In my hometown, first speed limit in the world, I think, 10 miles an hour in Harrow on the Hill.
And to carry on with that analogy, of course, the same thing. I think what we know, hopefully, what I hope I say will happen is that we'll have learned actually from that, because we still have cars that are only built for one person and one way of thinking. And cars are still only really tested for male crash test dummies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're thinking then in terms of AI, we also need to make sure it suits a whole range of and diverse way of either thinking or processes and things like that. And I think that's is it a danger? I don't know. It's certainly something to consider.
That's a fantastic point, and it links back to your point about the inherent bias that's everywhere, right? And the crash test dummies all being average male size, and all the tests on cars that I completely agree. That is really worth following through. The other, just thinking back to another conversation that I'd heard was we treat the output of some of these algorithms as fact, as you said earlier, Chris. But somebody said something recently around they should just be another input. It should be another source that you fact check like any other source. So they can be great. They can streamline things. Like they can make things. Large language models can make things. You understand things faster, but you should always check with another source just to make sure that what you're seeing is right. And if you treat it like that, I think you as a user are safer.
So I have this theory that what we'll end up becoming is just the creators and the editors, and that is the future of kind of work. Is that everything will be done. Generative AI will be stepping into the doing parts of work. We are the ones that have to be the fact checkers, the content creators, because we put the ideas in. Like, it will know what to do, but only if someone tells it what to do, and it's got to be. So then actually there's are leaning into creative and critical thought.
I think that absolutely, and just sort of following that thread, that the thing that you can't program an AI to do yet, and you might be able to in the future, is around empathy and understanding, and that real the human element of stuff. Could a generative AI become a counsellor? Probably not. Certainly not at the moment. Yeah. And I think that examining that and thinking about that, what are the jobs that humans actually uniquely placed to do?
That's a great segue, Mike, because I think we talk about how we should be using sort of AI and how it shouldn't be treated as fact, and I think that's always been the case. I remember a TED talk quite a long time ago now about humanistic AI, and it was always about just speeding things up for us, but not necessarily doing the whole shebang. It takes us 90% there, but then we are the magic 10% before we make any decision or present anything or whatever it is. And that 10% is maybe 10% of the effort, but it might be 90% of the value, right? So, and that's the human intervention. That's our human context checking, our business acumen, our emotional intelligence, the qualities that we have as humans. And Alex, you work in this industry, like in a Gen AI world, right? The humans in the middle of this still. So what is it that they're bringing?
Do you know? Have you come across Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy at all?
I know Ogilvy, but no, not Rory.
He's got a great TEDx talk and a book called Alchemy. And now he's the chairman of Ogilvy. He's worked a lot on their creative and things like that. And actually, advertising is a brilliant industry to learn from, because it is about data, but also connecting to humans and influencing humans. And his whole book, Alchemy, is about the fact that here's a great quote, that humans no more run on logic than horses run on petrol. And it is about that, what you're talking about, those human elements, that 10% is the magic or illogicalness of being human. And that is the fact that no matter where you go and what you do, you're going to have to deal with a human, and you're going to have to deal with their emotions and their motivations and their values. And as much as, in a sense, it'd be great, wouldn't it, that we just set something off and it works and it runs. Yeah. Humans need to be connected with.
And we can see that playing out already, right? I hadn't thought about the advertising industry, but there's been a lot of talk about Gen AI taking creative jobs, immediately, marketing, copywriting jobs immediately. But actually, from my own experience and talking to a few other people, this sort of 90, let's call it 80-20, it's because Pareto's been there forever. This 80-20 is actually playing out already, where Gen AI might be producing, advertising campaign with a wonderful tone of voice for It's Not All About the Numbers podcast. But then the 20% that we're adding is this humanness, right? It's looking at it and saying, no, that doesn't sound right, or that's not right for my audience, or this is going to have more of an impact. This is pleading to the emotions that the AI can't get. So this is already playing out. So we need to just nail this 20%, which is double the 10%, which makes it sound even more important. 20% of the humanness, right? But Mike, you were at the ODI. Was there any conversation about that human, in the middle?
So yes, and it was very. I mean, some of what I've said was sort of parroting things that I was hearing there in some respects around the need for humans around the edges. That I was just thinking when you said, Alex, about it'd be great if we could just set things running and we could just sit back. Actually, that'd be so dull, wouldn't it? The world would be so dull if everything was just working. And it is actually that putting your brain to things and thinking laterally around topics that make things interesting. Just on advertising, one of the things that I've always found really interesting is the way that Apple advertise their products versus how other computer companies advertise their products. And again, this is lifted from Simon Sinek's Start With Why, right?
Why, yeah.
But it's such a great example of when you're buying something, you can look at all of the facts, and that's probably what you would get logically presented to you, and it is what you get presented logically with, but actually it doesn't touch you, doesn't necessarily. And that's the Apple approach is, touch the humanness of you, then you're more likely to buy it. And I think, a really good illustration of what we're talking about.
There's the theory of movie trailers in terms of how you influence people to do things or take on new ideas or interest them in an idea, for instance. And it's about having the perfect blend of familiarity and also intrigue, and I suppose the unfamiliar. So you have to connect the two. So that's what Apple kind of have looked at. And it's really powerful how they look at how do we make this brand new, completely alien concept familiar and not terrifying. And I think any finance professional who has had to present to the board or present a new idea or ask about implementing a new technology, who's gone, this seems completely alien to you. And they have, that will be familiar, going, I've got to be the translator, which is something you just said, Chris. It's like, I've got to be the translator of what I know that's very technical and very alien to other people. And especially when technology and AI is changing so fast, what we're having to do is then go, well, how do we make this familiar and not scary so that people adopt it and take it on?
All this talk about advertising and marketing, and I think it's a great reference for us, actually, because when I talk about the change that's happening in my profession, sort of accounting and finance world, it's already happened a bit before. There's a whole digital marketing career now, and like you said, Ogilvy would be very data driven and digital first as an organization, but you go back to the Mad Men days and it's all paper and billboards. But you reminded me about this sort of humanness. I was listening to a podcast called Nudge.
Oh yeah,
it's a great podcast. And there was a sort of an award-winning story writer there who was talking a little bit about communication and messaging and storytelling. And he was saying, look, if you go into ChatGPT or use GenAI and say, look, write me an ad story for XYZ, it will reference all of the sort of hero story that which is there in abundance everywhere. The sort of the rise of someone, then the decline, and then the coming back to this massive win at the end. But he said, actually, what really makes good stories and adverts are characters. It's nothing to do with the plot, And he was arguing that that's almost an example of where creativity is a very human thing, rather than, and it's something that can't be recreated by say GenAI. So he's almost arguing the case for the industry not going into the hands of GenAI, because there's this alarming stat that 60 or 70% of online content will be generated by AI within the next 5 years. But it just sparked off that humanness that we all need to be focused on. How and you're a communicator, Alex. Tell us a bit more about your background, because you have quite a unique role and a unique sort of background when it comes to communication.
It's really fun. I've just the talk I did earlier this morning was actually at a school, and it was a careers thing, and we had someone who was one of the lead tech guys at AWS, someone else who was at WPP, which is the largest advertiser in the world, someone who's in investments, and then there was me, and they'd all, of course, done the usual A-levels, university, gone into a fruitful career. And so how I got into, and my background, the reason why I'm going there is because I stood up and went, I didn't do any of those things. I was always very good at two things. One was being analytical, and one was being creative, or certainly curious. Creatively curious, I think maybe is a thing. So I was great at biology and maths, but also music and drama, and had no idea what that meant for me in my future. And finally, I found it, which is that I basically use those theatre skills, those those creative skills, those communication skills, and teach them to people in finance. So I have both worked in finance. I worked at GE Corporate. I founded and ran and sold an accounting firm, and now I work with teams and professionals on their communication skills and as a coach. And so the way I approach it is both from psychology and also the fact that we're in theatre. So I actually have a drama degree. I went to drama school, it is about, you spend 3 years learning not just how to present on stage and speak well, but if you are stood on a stage and you're playing a character, you've got to understand the emotions, you've got to understand motivation and plot and narrative and how to move stories forward and how to tell a story so much that it influences the audience, and that when they leave you, they have been changed in some way. And then when I went back into kind of like corporate work, I went, oh, that's what we're trying to do here in the meeting rooms as well. Mm-hmm. This is helpful. And I worked at universities as well. So I worked in education and training. And so that's when I branched out on my own. And started my own business in terms of coaching and training people to be better communicators and use those human skills, as you were saying. So my background is slightly diverse, as you can tell.
I think that's brilliant. And what, as you were saying, as you were going through that, I was thinking, when you're now looking back, it almost seems obvious, right? It's like, I've got I did biology. I was good at biology. I was good at drama. I did these things, and I've ended up here. Look, it's magic. What were you? Have you got a sliding doors moment where you suddenly realised, actually, I've got that path open to me, but actually this is the path?
Do you know, I think it was a very slow sliding door of like, it's easy to look back, isn't it, with hindsight, and go, oh, of course. And actually, having spoken to these kids earlier today, I was saying, if you have different strengths and you're trying to figure out, well, what degree is it that I want to do? Is it psychology? I don't know. Is this a thing? And the truth was that really, without sounding totally cheesy, I suppose a little bit ahead of my time, is that the job didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
That I was going to, how could I possibly train for it? Like, I even did coding. Like, I went off Thames Valley University. You could go and do modules and courses as part of their degree courses. So in the evenings, I'd go out and learn coding. I've used it in every single job I've ever had. But that wasn't something that was taught when we were at school. So I think now, if I'd have known, oh, you can be an executive coach and you can actually train people to use theatre skills, but they don't know it's theatre skills, to be better and make their companies better. And it's like, I think looking back, the only sliding doors moment is actually more of a business sense, which is, I think, what skills do you have and how are they valuable to someone else? So it was about the fact that I go, okay, what skills do I have? Okay, I know how to do that. How is that valuable here? Oh, okay, that's really valuable, teaching someone, to be a better presenter, to have a strategy, to be more influential, to pitch for investment, to do any of those kind of things. It's like, oh, they don't know how to do that. That would be really useful. So I think, like any business, you end up going, what do I know? And how is that useful for someone else?
That's fascinating. I think that one of the things that, my two sons, one's 15, just doing his GCSEs, one's 18, just doing his A-levels, right? And they're deciding on their paths. And I so wish I could translate and give them just some experience. Just some, having done some stuff, because I think that if I'd done some stuff before I made some decisions at that age, maybe I could have shortcut to where I am, right? And it sounds very similar. It's interesting.
I love what you were saying there, Alex, as well, about my job didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And then, yes, there wasn't a sliding doors moment, but it sounds like there was a period where you were trying to find that ideal role, and then that actually maybe people caught up with you. You were already trying to do that. How did you sort of tread water during those years? Because now you're good, but was there a period where you just felt, I'm surrounded by idiots?
I'm sure you were good. I'm sure you were good back then as well.
Well, it is. I think it's like any career. You go through your early years, don't you, cutting your teeth and learning what to do and what not to do. and gaining that experience. And so I worked at some amazing places. I worked at GE, I worked at Imperial College, I worked at London 2012, and with incredible people. And I think the one thing that my family certainly always taught me, who weren't corporate at all or business, they weren't in that world, they're in the creative world, and was that the power of making connections and relationships and learning, being scrappy, learning everything you possibly can from the people around you. And so I think I followed my nose with, well, what am I good at? And so the reason why I started my own business was that I was the head of education at a training company, and then I was kind of like, after a few years, it's like there was literally nowhere to go. There was nowhere for me to progress. I was directly below the CEO, and I was like, well, what else do I do? I either go work for another company, and that was an option. I could have worked in training in another company, or I can build my own business. And that's kind of sounds, I was just turning 30. I was just about to get married. And I was just about to graduate as well. So it taken me a while to graduate. So I was paying and working as I was doing it. And I went, yeah, well, that sounds like the next adventure. And I had always wanted to run my own business and create my own thing. And I had a very clear picture of what everything could look like. And you know what, kids today, part of what really surprised me is I think like business sense in kids today is a lot more prevalent. So I think like thinking about your son or anyone like looking at their careers and the jobs that don't exist now, I think that's what we actually have to prepare them for. Yeah. And what we didn't take action on, I think in previous generations was going, well, we don't know what you're going to be yet, but how about you create these skills and you just do where they fit. And so we're talking, I think there were like 14 or something like that in this crowd. And the questions, we're wondering what questions. The teacher said to us, don't worry, they don't really raise their hands. And they were raising their hands. One of them actually said, well, what should I be investing in? and one question, which
what
really
crypto exchange?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then one of them was actually, he put his hand up, this little kid, and he said, and he asked the AWS guy, because he was sharing some really slightly terrifying but fascinating things about technology and actually how old some technologies are that we don't know about. And he said, will AI be taking over my job? And I thought, God, I've been hearing that all year. And this is a little kid that's or teenager that's saying it. And then that was the conversation. Well, what are you strong at? Work on that.
Yeah. Well, we've got to keep an eye on the talent that's coming into the workforce for sure. And I do think there's going to be a wholesale change in how we train people, how we support them. And it's definitely not, hierarchical anymore. I think we all need to be learning all the time. And I love those diverse teams and cross-functional teams back in those transformational days. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to just have a little chat about a question that came in. And if you are interested in asking any questions, then you can email us at podcast@generationcfo.com, who produces this, or reach out to Mike and myself directly on LinkedIn. And we had a question come in this week from Sam, who is a manager of analytics and management information. And he was sort of there's a lot going on in his world of data management, right? But I think the final question was the really sweet question that he was looking up for an answer to, which was, how does the IT business relationship work in your organizations with regards to data? And I'd probably break those two things down. It's like, how do two teams, how does that relationship work in any big organization? How do they come together and communicate and collaborate? And then there is this sort of subject area around data and where should it sit? So, Mike, I'll come to you first. Data management and you work on a lot of data projects. How first of all, how do you see that sort of business and IT relationship working in big organizations? And Where does data normally fit in?
Well, that's a big question, right? So I think
that's why Sam's asked it.
Yeah, no. So my experience is in different organisations, it's different, but usually what happens is data is seen as a thing that happens over there. IT is seen as a thing that happens over there, and it's almost like a service that's provided in, and we'll let the geeks go over there and do their thing. And actually, that's usually when problems start, because everybody uses data all of the time. Everybody uses technology in IT all of the time, and actually, the key bit is the translator. Back to the translator conversation we were having a bit earlier. The key bit is that translator bit, to make sure that the business, so the people in the business, can communicate with the data experts, and the data experts can communicate with the people in the business, so they understand what each other are asking and are trying to do. And it's similar with the IT function. I think that one of the problems that I've seen in places is data gets put under IT, and IT investments are usually on like a 5-year horizon. So you invest in something and it will last for about 5 years, and after 5 years you need to replace it. The problem is data runs through that and carries on and on and on and on and on. So people don't see the investment in data in the same way as they see investment in IT. So for me, it's about, to come back to what we've been talking about today, it's about how do you humanize that? How do you get this kind of conversation happening so people understand what their requirements are? The short answer to all of that whole thing was it usually doesn't work very well.
Yeah, I'll just wade in on the data side, and then Alex, maybe you can sort of come in on the relationship side of things in corporates. But I don't think it matters too much when it comes to data. I think, data is a 4-letter word, right? Nobody wants to own it. You can arguably have process owners owning it because they own the process, therefore the quality of the data that's coming out of it could be process owner. It could be in our IT, it could be in the business itself. I think when we were talking to Dominique a couple of weeks ago, she was sort of saying around analytics being a bit of a pawn that moves from, finance back to IT and then back again. It really doesn't matter as long as we're getting what we want from data. But I do think that there is a problem in that these conversations aren't being had very much, right? Because that people aren't working together. And, Alex, what would sort of be your advice around, if there were two functions that really needed to have a strong, positive relationship to nail something like data, what would be your sort of suggestions to the leadership there and the teams?
I would almost not just look at the functions, look at it, because to be honest with you, I've seen this happen with various functions in different organizations where, for instance, the audit team need to actually be talking to the sales team, or and vice versa. It's usually what happens is you've got someone who is, let's say, more creative, or you have a subject matter expert talking to another subject matter expert. And the only thing is that they are going, well, this is important to me. And I can't believe you can't appreciate how important this is to me. And I need to achieve this. And why aren't you doing what I want? And that's really actually the question, is how do you get everyone who is thinking what is important to them actually collaborating and working together. I did, and why I say it's not just to which departments, because this happens in so many places. I was brought in to work with natural capital, like there's conferences and things like that. And we actually used improv as a way of getting all of the people, the departments, to converse with each other. And that's because, again, like the soil person is interested in soil, the accounts person is interested in accounts, the finance person, investor is interested in the return, and the clean air quality person is interested in that. And they're so laser focused, which is fantastic and what you want in those people. But if they're not connecting with each other, and to be honest, the really quick answer to that is that all you need to do is to get them to step away from what's important to them and focus on the common ground and what's important to them equally. So for us, that's why we used improv, it was a case of, right, well, you are going to create a story using the topics that you specialize, so the brainstorm things about soil and air quality, and create a story out of it. Now with improv, you have to say yes. You can't ignore someone, you can't talk over someone, you can't repeat their idea later, you can't have any ego really, because you have to tell the story. It's all about all of you coming together to tell the story, no matter who gets the more lines or parts or anything. And they had to learn how to do that together and win together. And this is the same with executive coaching. If you've got someone who is promoting like digital transformation, we need to be doing digital transformation and data analytics in our business, because we're going to be left behind. But the sales team were going, you're taking ages doing this and our clients are going to be really upset. And then you've got a problem. And so in all of those situations, it's just, well, what do you think they care about the most?
Yeah.
Why? Why do they care? Why does sales care about time versus quality? Because that's what they need to achieve, and that's their objective. You need to object quality, and you don't have the time to do it in. And so it's just about understanding the motivations and what people are trying to achieve, and see if you can ultimately serve the client or serve whoever in the best way possible, and have that.
I love it. I like the idea of a bit of improv. I haven't heard of that. You know, Mike's a great facilitator and has a lot of tricks up his sleeves, but I don't think we've gone to improv yet, have we, Mike?
It's difficult. It's difficult to do things that you're not comfortable doing yourself, right? And I'm not sure about that. I think I improv quite a lot, but not
stand up there. Don't tell me a joke. yeah, exactly. Look, I'm going to wrap up now. So I have got two things for good data, bad data, and I'm not moving away from this because people are starting to pick up on this and, you know, hashtagging me good data, bad data, which is great. But the first one, good data, and this is a plug, I don't care, but GenCFO Academy had 1,200 regs, which is a whopping 40% growth year on year. I love that number. I love that data. And may it continue. A bit of bad data, though. My good friend Mike Rose has a bit of a catchphrase called which he says, I'm not an accountant. But the bad data is that Ivanka Trump, who's testifying on the Trump fraud at the moment, also has that catchphrase, doesn't she, Mike?
Yeah, that was a bit of a shocker.
So I don't know who's going to have to change their catchphrase, but
I think I'll be around longer. That's my theory.
True enough. Well, look, thank you very much for being with us today, Alex. That was great. It was really good to sort of hear your insights there and bring in a slightly different perspective to all this digital transformation chat. And you know, we would love to have shout outs at this point in the podcast. So if you are interested in shouting out anybody that you know, anybody who's done a great job, anybody who's doing charity, which we've plugged before, then do send us your emails to podcast@generationscfo.com. And the very last shout out for me this week is to Mike, who supported the Academy this week, and also the Gen CFO team. They did a fantastic job. So Kira, Olivia, Ryan, Sophie, very well done. All of the speakers who were part of it, because it was a spectacular show. So thank you to everyone, and thanks again for being part of this. And Mike, if there's anybody at the ODI that you want to give a shout out to, then
I was going to say the same thing, actually. I was going to say your team, but I was also going to say that the ODI summit this week was amazing, and the list is quite long, so I'm not going to go through it. But yeah, everybody that was involved in setting that up, it was such a great show.
Okay, we'll make sure that the millions go into the show notes. So sounds good. Anyway, thanks a lot. Thank you, Alex, and we'll see you again soon. And remember, it's not all about the numbers.